Hello, everyone. It doesn't matter how I fix this light, it doesn't seem to be the best lighting. But anyway, we are live. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Maggie. So glad you were able to join us this Saturday afternoon. Of course, it's been raining on and off all day here, and I hope you're doing well. As you know, I had decided to tackle the topic of nurse CNA relationship. Welcome, everyone. I am so happy to have you join us today. And why did I choose to do this topic? I know in my 34 plus years of nursing, you know, I've I have some stories I could tell about how I have related, how I have worked with CNAs, nursing assistants, whether it's in a hospital setting, home health aides, in home care, and lastly, in skilled nursing facilities. And I think if you talk to any nurse, she will also have some stories to tell because the relationship sometimes can be challenging. And why is that? Let's see. If I can think about it, when I was a new nurse, maybe in the 80s, 90s, I remember I was working agency, and I went to one hospital, and I got there. And of course, when you're agency, you walk in, you don't have anybody to tell you anything. You have to kind of find your way around. Where is the supply room? Where do you keep that? And the nurse who's giving you a report, I remember it was 3 to 11. She just wanted to get out. It wasn't her mindset or her duty to kind of ease you into it. You just go by the seat of your pants. And that's why, it takes a special person to work agency. You have to be able to find information on your own. And I remember um, I walked in and there was this gentleman. I assume he was sundowning. He pulled his IV and he was bleeding all over the place. And I'm like, oh my God, I don't even know where the linen closet is to get a towel or something to hold pressure on this person's intercubital area where he pulled the IV out. And I said, I was seeing this and they just turned their heads around, kept going. It was like, don't ask me anything. You the nurse, you're on your own, you do whatever. Of course, I survived and the patient was okay, but it was that barrier that was there. It was like, I'm a CNA, you're on your own. And in my practice, I noticed that a lot of the CNAs who I'm hoping some CNAs get to watch this because I don't think it's a one sided relationship. And I don't pretend to say that all the responsibilities rest with just nurses. No, when you're married, it takes two to tango. So I feel like it goes both ways. But what I was trying to, in my mind, when I started jotting down something to talk about, I just want you to get some insight. I don't know. This word comes in my vocabulary a lot. Insight. I think if you give yourself time to study a situation, to get to know someone, don't rely just on your gut and that first impression. Just like when you dating, it takes time for you to get to know this person. They may be on their best behavior in the beginning, but eventually the mask is going to come off and the real person is going to stand out. So I feel like it's going to take both teams to really understand. I don't want to give the impression that CNAs resent nurses, and there could be reasons why they do, but we also, as nurses, need to get an understanding as to what our CNAs are, what their lives are about. And so we can kind of develop that compassion and empathy and understanding, right? That this person is got, I mean, life happens. Not that it doesn't happen to nurses, but I feel like as nurses, we have a bit more resources sometimes, and things might be just a tad easier for us than it is for our CNAs. So just give yourself time to understand. And yes, you could say, well, I got a lot on my plate. I got this and this and this. It's true. But I always say your CNA can make or break you. If you don't spend time understanding your CNA, loving on them, supporting them, it could be really tough for you, and your license could be on the line because your CNAs are your eyes and ears. They see things before you even get a chance to. So it behooves you to spend time nurturing that relationship so that she can see why here for you. Okay. So what I thought, in this environment that we're in right now, whether we work, whatever setting we work in, whether you work in a hospital, you have what we call techs, med techs, you work in home health, you have home health aides, you work in long term care, you have certified nursing assistant and restorative nursing assistants. It is a given that those places cannot function without CNAs. They can't function without nurses either. But I personally feel like the CNA's value is just a tad higher because if somebody misses a couple of doses of medications, they might be okay, but they can't stay in a wet diaper for a long time, even though you might say, oh, yeah, but some of them don't change them. I know, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm saying the basic necessities of life and comfort rest with those CNAs. And as nurses, a lot of us don't have time, nor do we care to provide those kind of services. Don't get it twisted, and don't even lie to yourself. You know you don't want to go in there and change those diapers. You know you don't want to struggle to get the 400-pound patient out of bed. You know that, but yet you expect your CNA to do it without help. Come on now, come on. So I feel like the need for CNAs, the need is greatest. And of course, we have more CNAs than we do nurses because the ratio, you as a nurse can have 20 patients, and hopefully your CNA doesn't have 20 patients. Anyway, it's a whole different um, conversation, and we're not going to go into that. Hi, whoever joined, thank you for coming. But anyway, I wanted to get you to understand what being a CNA means in this day and age. Now, I graduated nursing in 1982, 84. Hi, Aisha. So when I work in my hospital, I did not have any issues with my CNAs. I mean, they were there to do the vitals, and I think the role was a little bit different. They were allowed to do a lot more to provide more support for us nurses. Now they have changed it. You go into a facility and some CNAs can do this, can do that. I posted something real funny the other day on one of the websites. It was about a CNA being asked by the nurse to change a colostomy bag. It was so funny. But we know, I mean, I go through these. There wasn't a week that passes by that I didn't get a CNA complaint and huffing and puffing that the nurse asked her to change the colostomy bag. That is a nurse function. A lot of times, the CNA is just uncomfortable. They're not sure about their skills. Even if you take a CNA into a skills lab, you say, okay, this is the wafer, this is how you change it. They're still a little bit uncomfortable, some of them. Of course, your seasoned CNAs, they can just slap that thing on better than some nurses. Okay, that's another conversation. But the average CNA is uncomfortable. So if the CNA is uncomfortable, why do you, as a nurse, have to push it and make it a point This is your job because I'm asking you. We're going to talk about that too, because this kind of attitude just sets you up for failure. All right, let's understand some stats, right? The CNA is typically a woman, right? 90%, 89.97%, one study says, of CNAs are female. Only about 12% are male. And I'm seeing a lot more male CNAs now than I used to do before. And you all can relate to that, right? 66% of them are white. Now, that was a surprise to me because in my experience, I thought most of my CNAs were minorities. I've worked in my area here where I am. If you work in any facility, you're going to see 90+% of them are people of color, Hispanics or Black. Okay? And we're not going to go into the sociological demographic reason why that is. Those are low paying jobs. And of course, more minorities do low paying jobs, period. Okay. It doesn't mean you don't have some whites doing them too. And the data is saying 90% of them are white. To me, that's a surprise, but I have to trust the data. Okay. 14% Latinos and only 9% are Black. All right. So when you're thinking of CNAs, you talk about nursing assistants, and we can talk about the most important function of a CNA: bathing, activities of daily living, ADLs, bathing, grooming, assisting with feeding, changing, getting them out of bed. Then you have the home health aide. Now, CNAs, I don't know about every single state, but most of them are registered with the Board of Nursing in their state. They have to take an exam. It's a very easy exam, right? But they have a license, a certificate. The home health aide can be trained by an employer. When I have my home health agency, I had a course. Somebody can come from outside and I interviewed them and they seem very caring. And we can put them through a course that I teach, that I taught. And then you give them a certificate, say they're home health aide. And they can go into the home and provide the same services. And the difference is it's the licensure requirement. Okay. If I'm wrong with that, Aisha, you can correct me since you're probably more versed in those. In Florida, where I am, a home health aide can work in home health. They cannot work in a skilled nursing facility because the conditions of participation says that they have to be a licensed certified nursing assistant. Now, they can be a CNA/HHA. That's okay. And that CNA/HHA can also work in a home care company, right? But when I had my home care company, if you were a Medicare certified agency, they couldn't just be a home health aide. They had to have the CNA anyway. It's just regulatory. Okay, think about that. It's the regulation. So when you had like a companion agency, you could just do a course for them. If you had people doing private, we used to have a type of license. What do they call them? Where they just stay for like 12 hours, 6 hours with a patient. Anyway, all kind of nuances and differences. But anyway, in long-term care, they have to be certified by the state. Okay. And every state in the nation has different rules and regulations. So CNAs coming from New York, when they come to transfer the license, they have to go to the Board of Nursing and read all the requirements. If they meet it, they do an application, get a reciprocity, and boom, they can work. So you have CNAs, HHAs, and you have RNAs, restorative nursing assistant. Those are CNAs that have gotten a different, like a higher level of training through the therapy department. So they are trained in transferring, doing range of motion. You have a lot of patients who finish their therapy program, but they're not yet at goal. So they would switch them to restorative. So the RNA goes and does range of motion, gets them out of bed, put them in the wheelchair, take them around, walks with them. So you're continuing that level of mobility. So those are the restorative CNAs, and they typically get a little bit more money. Okay, and they're the ones that are a little bit more experienced doing that. All right. So I was looking at what kind of traits are we looking for when we think of a CNA, right? I developed like a 10-point assessment for nurses, things, nursing supervisors actually, things that I feel personally that if you want to be an effective and successful nursing supervisors, you must master those skills. Things like multitasking, things like being able to function under stressful um, situations, communicate very well, being organized, things like that. So when I look at the CNAs, what I saw were things like being detail oriented. Yeah, also a nurse could benefit from that. Communication was a biggie. I remember when I was in home health, we used to have classes every single year about communication. How your CNA communicates with you, when they communicate with you, how do they determine what is important to report to their nurse? So, we're going to talk towards the end about what the nurses need to do to nurture that relationship to the point where that CNA feels comfortable, reporting things to you. But you know what? Let's go back to the licensure issue. A CNA by law to the regulation is working under the license of a nurse, either as an LPN or an RN, right? So you actually delegating those duties. Why do you think they make the nurse sign the plan of care, right? The CNA assignment sheet, the nurse has to sign it. That means you delegating to the CNA the duty of getting Mr. Smith out of bed, of checking Mr. Smith's skin, of reporting to you anything abnormal. They're not eating, they look dehydrated, they have pain. So you have your CNAs constantly communicating to you, reporting to you on this patient's condition. So if you're not vested in communicating with that CNA, letting them know what your expectations are, what you expect them to report to you, then it's not going to work, right? You're going to miss things. And I said in the beginning, your CNAs can make you and break you. I have heard CNAs that had set up a nurse, got them in trouble. They had not reported things they should have reported because that nurse was being a B to them. I worked I work at a facility where there was this LPN. He was kind of young in his 30s. You know how you have a nurse who's probably young, right? And they come to the unit and they start working, and all of a sudden they feel the need to assert their authority. Well, I'm the nurse, you're the CNA. Oh, girl, don't do that. They're gonna look at you up and down, and they're gonna say, "We're gonna get you." So this LPN, I think he was even an agency. So he came, he started ordering the CNAs around. And when you go into a new facility, you kind of have to step back. You have to read. You got to feel your way and realize who's got the power. Who can you go to and ask question? Who is going to help you? And it takes time to kind of observe and figure that out. But anyway, right away, he asserted himself. He felt like he was being this assertive nurse. So he started saying, well, so and so needs to be changed. You need to go into that light. Oh, the CNAs, and some of these CNAs, they run the show. Let me tell you, they have been allowed to run the show. But these were CNAs that had been in that facility for 20 some years. So they felt entitled. And some of these CNAs, the old timers, we call them, they feel like they can tell you what to do, but you got to be diplomatic about how you want to work with them because you're still the nurse. Even though they might feel like they run the show, but you're the one responsible for those patients. So you have to find a way smartly to work with them and get them to do their job so you can protect your patient. So I think the next day I came back and they said that guy, he had worked an 11 to 7 shift. When he came out one morning, all his tires had been slashed. So they called the police, and the police taking statement. Does anybody know anything? Oh no. Everybody's like, no, we didn't see anything. We didn't hear anything. He was out of four tires. And I was like, it just wasn't a smart way to approach those ladies. Okay. So don't do that. So, thinking about the skill set, and remember, most of what I talk about, I don't talk about teach, even though I taught a CNA course myself, I created one. The other day, I think maybe a few months ago, I was at a facility and I saw a CNA. She's like, Miss Maggie, you remember you're the one who taught me my first class, and that's how I got my license. And I was like, oh, that's so cute. But anyway, when I talk about this is not one, I'm not going to teach you how to make a bed. I'm not talking about, what to report and all that kind of stuff for a CNA. I'm talking about the soft skills. Soft skills are things that are not tangible. Those are things that are, what's, how do I define soft skills? Those are skills that you have that are going to enhance your life and the life of the people that you work with. They may not be physical action, but a lot of them are physical actions. Okay, they go beyond the obvious or the main points of the job, which is what I teach when I talk about nursing supervisors. So they talk about communication. It's very important for a CNA. Detail oriented. That means they're not going to overlook something. Okay. So you want a CNA who's going, and of course, we've worked with CNAs who think they're nurses. And I don't want to say it like that because a lot of them have a lot of experience, right? It's just like I've heard people say, oh, I have some LPNs who are better than RNs. And that's true. And that's true. It may not be what they know, it might be the execution or how they approach situation or patients. But even though a CNA, I don't think they think in their head that they're better than a nurse, but they might just say, I've seen this, I'm experienced. Okay. So as a nurse, you don't want to discount that, right? You want to appreciate it and you want to amplify and have them use that knowledge to help you to their job better. Because as I said, don't get it twisted. Whatever that CNA knows is going to enhance their delivery of their job. It doesn't absolve you of your job and it doesn't replace your responsibility to that CNA or that patient. So some nurses are a little bit intimidated, and I think it goes with experience in how you deal with your CNAs. And that's what we want to talk about. Age got nothing to do with it, but it takes finesse, it takes experience, it takes understanding human relationships to know how to deal with different variations of people personalities, cultural understanding. That's a lot of information that goes into all that, right? So communication is important. Flexibility, okay? Flexibility is a big thing for CNAs because a lot of them are so rigid in terms of assignment. The things I dealt with a lot in the nursing home is this is my section. I have those rooms. And one day I said, I'm sorry, I don't see your name on those doors. I don't see your name on that hall. Is there a plaque? I said, we are here to take care of patients. I don't want to hear about this is my section. That means I can't insert a light over that way. No. In fact, I'm going to be writing an ebook about, I think there are different ways we can manage assignments and care deliveries in these nursing homes because they are still talking about decreasing reimbursement. Can you imagine in this day and age with everything we've gone through for CMS to even consider cutting, reimbursement to these nursing homes? So, and again, I'm one of those, I want to do what I can based on what I can. You fight your battle. If we can still um advocate, which is the name of this channel, advocate, but we need to be realistic and try to work within the framework of what we have to work with, right? So flexibility is important. And I think it would be nice for management to make sure they put it in the job description for a CNA to understand you get the assignment that is given to you by your nurse. You don't get to choose where you work. That is a big problem in long-term care facilities. And management needs to address it, because you as a nurse, if you come in and like me as a supervisor, well, I was on the weekend, right? I was on the weekend. It was like me. So they didn't have any way to call the DON. Who they want to do that? They don't want to call the administrator. I was it. So if I tell you you're going over there, they didn't have a choice but to go. They were giving me attitude. Yeah. And we'll talk about that in a minute. So flexibility is important. And nurses and managers need to invest in the onboarding process, which is what I just said. Make sure you lay the rules, you lay the law, you let them know how we do things, what the expectations are, so that when you are implementing it as your nurse, then it's like, yeah, it's written down here that you're going to be flexible with the assignment. We do what we need to do to take care of the patients, regardless of what the staffing is, okay? Because that alone can just mess you up in terms of cohesiveness, the others watching to see how you're managing it, and to see, if you're going to let them get away with it. And it's just like a lot of stuff going on. Okay. The ability to take and follow direction. I think those are skills that everybody needs, because in any facility, you have hierarchy, right? We used to call that the corporate tree structure, who you go to. You have your CNAs who, for every little thing, well, I'm going to talk to the DON. It's like, I'm sorry, no. I say, your nurse is right there. You go to your nurse first. Or they'll say, Miss Maggie, I want to talk to you about something. I'm like, did you talk to your nurse? Right? So I'm redirecting all the time, because to me, it's a lack of respect for a CNA to go straight to the manager and bypassing their nurse. How many times I said that? Your nurse is your direct supervisor. And until we reinforce that, I'm sorry that this phone is crooked. Until we reinforce that, we're always going to have issues with CNAs not understanding the structure. They need to know that your nurse, your unit manager, then your DON, then your administrator. You don't go straight to the top. That's disrespectful. And I used to always reinforce that. So they need to be able to take direction. If your nurse tells you, I would like you, and of course, the tone on how you approach them is important. Can you please go this and this and that? Your CNA should have no problem following that direction, because they're working under you. You are the first authority, right? The ability to take direction to talk about. Respect for authority. Whew, that can be a problem in long-term care, in any setting. There are some people, and of course, if the nurse understand, if you understand where this person comes from, their family structure, how they were raised, the cultural, whatever their culture is, sometimes it gives you a glimpse on why they're acting the way they are. That doesn't mean then that you accept it. You're always redirecting, but it makes your job a little tougher, right? When you have someone who flies out of the handle, is upset about everything you tell them, they never follow direction, they're always grumbling, and just some of them cuss you out. Sometimes I used to say, I'd like to be a little fly on the wall and outside when they're having a little meeting and talk about us nurses. But you have to also be able to just brush it off. You can't take that personally, okay? If a CNA is blatantly disrespectful, yes, you have to address it. And I think maybe next week I'll come back with part two when we talk about specific instances or where we just butted head with our CNAs and how we can kind of make it a little bit easier. I don't think we'll have time to do that today, but there's a lot of that going on. Yeah. And that's why sometimes the nurses feel like, oh, they're all bitching over here and there is this division, and it's not good. It's not good at all. Respect for authority. They have to be a team player. That's a biggie, right? Just like I said, you have a CNA who feels like, well, I've always worked on that hall, these rooms. Same thing. We have nurses. If God forbid we took them off a cot over here, put them over there, oh, the sky is falling. Why? I understand that this is where you work most of the time, and I get that. But I think as a supervisor and unit manager, we don't come to the schedule and say, oh, we're going to mess you up. We're going to send you over there. No. Usually it's because of something happening in the schedule, the staffing that causes them to move you. You have to understand that. And what does it matter? If you go over there, there's still patients. They still need our care. They still need their treatment, their medication. Why should you make it? I mean, I used to have this particular nurse whenever she floated, which was almost at least once a month. She would just bitch and complain. And one day she was we floated her to the area because I said I always sat in a little corner. And for the whole 8 hours, this girl sat next to me. She never said a word to me. She was huffing and I'm like, if she can be like that to me, imagine how she is with the residents. That's unfortunate. That's unfortunate. I think it was getting close to 3 o'clock. And then she asked me a question. I'm like, oh, you finally decided to talk to me after 7.5 hours. How grand, how mature of you. That was so sad. That was so sad. But yeah, it happens. And me as a supervisor, I'm like, you come, you take care of your patients. Be you, I be me. Didn't bother me. I think when you do that as a CNA or a nurse, it just shows the person you are. Yeah, you may be going through some things, but I always tell people you cannot hide behind what's happening at home or in your life and let that reflect how you do your work. That's unprofessional. So being a team player, okay? So those are just a few things that we can talk about in terms of what we would like to see our CNAs, what kind of soft skills we'd like to see in them. But let's talk about generally in terms of lifestyle. The average age of the CNA, they say, is about 41, which is close to the average age of a nurse. So we're no spring chicken, right? We are getting older. And just like we don't have a lot of people going into nursing, we don't have a lot of people going into becoming a CNA either. I mean, who would choose to do this kind of work just because this is what we love to do? Very, very few people. That is back-breaking work. It is a thankless job. And that's why we, as nurses, managers, we need to invest so much more into, all the positive energy we need to send their way. Our CNAs are making low wages, okay? The majority of them are single parents, right? They have kids, they have to balance children, and with very limited funds, and they don't have a lot of support sometimes. And now I went to the store yesterday. I'm thinking, what if, think about it today, if you have a CNA, she's not working agency, she's working, making maybe $15 an hour, and that would be a good wage. A lot of them, when I was working, they were making 10, 12 hours dollars an hour. I had CNAs who said they'd been working at that place for 5 years It had not gotten one raise. That is disgusting. That is really totally unfair. So you have this person making this little bit of money, and then now gas is $5 a gallon, and they still have to get in their car if they have a car. Some of them have to take buses. Some of them I've seen them come drenched, in the rain because they had to walk to come to work. And then let's say they have two, three kids. Now, can you imagine? The price of food yesterday when I went to the store had gone up 40 to 50%. Gasoline had doubled. Can you imagine what your CNAs are going through right now? Right now, with the money that they're making. So, do you blame them if they go take an assignment somewhere and so they can make some money? I know I talk a lot about balancing and to avoid burnout. Do you think our CNAs have the uh, what's the word I'm looking for? You think it's an option for them to just say, "Oh, I need a day off, because I need to recharge. I don't want to burn out." Mm, I don't think so. I don't think so. When you're fighting to get the basic necessities, when you're struggling just to survive, it makes it really hard, and it will affect your mood, your emotions. And, because by the time the CNA gets to work, let's say at 7, right? She probably had to get her kid, put the kid on the corner to wait for the bus, worried about all crazies, grabbing these children, kids being bullied on the bus. Then what if they call them from the school that the kid is sick? Does she have a car to go get the kid? Are you, as a manager, flexible enough to allow her to leave to go take care of a kid? What if she doesn't have a car? She has to catch a ride. Life is tough. So I need you as a nurse to get that insight. I talk a lot about introspection. You need to be sensitive to what's happening in somebody else's life. And don't nitpick about every little thing. Sometimes we let some things go. It's not because it should not be addressed, but it's just a whole lot on that person. That if it's not that important, let it go. If they come in 15 minutes late because they have to catch a ride, let it go. Sometimes if they put their head to the side during their break time and they fall asleep because they're not catching a lot of sleep, you go tap them. You need to go get them, you tap them. But you don't need to write them up for that. Be a human. Be a human. Okay? So how can we, in the few minutes that we have left, how can we enhance the relationship between CNAs and nurses? And as I said, next week, I can think, I'll write down some different situations that I've experienced or I've seen and see how we can better manage those. But what are some general things that we can do as nurses, as the first line of authority over the CNAs? We need to make sure we constantly emphasize that. Show genuine appreciation. Now, in addition to what I just said, understanding what's going on in that CNA's life, and how do you, as a nurse, find that out? I mean, you're not going to be nosy and say, "Are you married? Are you single? Are you divorced? Do you have children?" That's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying. But the way, just like we talk about racial tension and relationships in the community, if you don't get to know someone, you're not going to know anything about their lives, right? So you spend time with those people, you talk to them. When you're sitting at the desk, engage them in conversation. When they're talking, listen. You learn a lot from listening to them talking to each other, right? And when you have lunch, don't go sit out. Well, even though I tell supervisors to get out of the building so they can get, quality time. But when you are eating in the day room, engage them in conversation. Don't sit on your phone all the time. How do you build relationship? It's like you go to dinner and you look around the room and you see a couple eating and they're both on their phone. What is that? What's the point of sitting and having a meal with someone if you're going to be on your phone? Come on, that is rude. So you need to spend time, talk to that person about anything, and that's how you learn. How do they feel about sports, religion, politics, the building? That doesn't mean I'm asking you to gossip about people, but you don't get to know someone until you spend time with them and you find out what makes them tick. Okay. And you also going to find out what's happening in their lives. So show appreciation. If they do something for you, go out of your way to say thank you. And I always say, if a patient says something nice about your CNA, when you're having a little huddle or meeting, you need to bring it up in public. You praise in public, remember? And then you mentor in private. Praise in public. Remember that. Include your team members in the decision making. If there is an issue on the unit, it doesn't impact just nurses, right? And I know facilities have a hard time getting people to participate in team meeting. And they say, oh, every time we go to those monthly meetings, it turns into a bitching session. And it's true. I've seen them, I've heard them. But maybe you can have smaller huddle, okay? You can have like two or three of them just standing there and you say, what do you think about that? Do you know CNAs or anybody, any human, they appreciate being included in the decision making process. And you know what? If you ask them, they will tell you. And sometimes they do have some good ideas. There is nothing wrong to say, well, you know what? Aisha is the one who suggested that. And thank you. That was a good idea. What is wrong with that? It doesn't diminish you as a nurse to give a CNA the credit. People need to grow up seriously. Um, Find ways to show appreciation. I said that. Don't play favorite. Oh, mm. You've had the nurses of the little cliques. They have their friends they hang out with. They eat lunch with the same people every single day. But that doesn't include your CNAs because CNAs tend to kind of rotate. So if you know somebody from the outside and then at work you're only hanging out with that same person, how are you going to learn the others? How are you going to befriend them? How are you going to get to know them? It's like when you go into a social setting, you don't hang around with that one person. That's for somebody who's socially inept. When you walk into a room, you just gravitate to that one person and you hang on to that person for dear life. They don't teach you that. If you're going to network, you work a room, you go around, you shake hands, you smile, you introduce yourself, you pass your card. That's what networking is in business circle. And in life, it's the same thing. You need to get to know. I'm telling you, when I work as a supervisor, I knew something about every person because I made it a point to stop and talk. How are the kids? What's happening? Are you okay? Is your mom okay? What are you doing for Christmas? What are you doing for Thanksgiving? Ask basic question. That doesn't mean you're gonna know you want to know their business, but it shows that you genuinely interested. And don't fake it. They'll know. Okay? So don't play favorite. You have to open your mind and embrace everybody. Invest in the onboarding. If you have a new staff member, that is so important. Okay? When you have a new CNA that come on the team, make it a point to go talk to them. Say, oh, welcome to the team. Listen, my name is Maggie. If you have any question, you don't know what something is, come get me. You know how important and how refreshing that is to a new employee to see that somebody took the time to say, if you have any question, come get me. That is something really small, but it's so important. Okay. Encourage early reporting. That's part of the communication. that you want to tell your CNA. Sometimes you can have a little, I don't want to say powwow, but to say, okay, I'm telling you how I work. And then again, it's a delivery, it's how you say it, right? Because if you're a nurse, you got these rooms, so you want to go to your CNA to say, oh, and I encourage CNAs to go around at shift change so they can see the patients. Just like the nurses, I want them to go walk around and look at that way. You don't have to go back. You can go in there and say, okay, this is more than so and so. He had a pretty good day, but he had some pain, blah, blah, blah. Same thing with the CNAs. Don't let it turn into a bitching session. That happens all the time. The next shift comes. Oh, I don't know why. So and so was wet. So and so the trash wasn't taken. And sometimes those are valid. So you have to address them, right? So the next time the person comes, you say, hey, please make sure you pick up this. You don't just say, well, so and so said the trash wasn't picked up. So you're just going to feed into this negativity. But you, as the nurse, the first line supervisor, you could say, hey, you know what? I think we had some concern that yesterday the trash wasn't picked up. Could you make sure the trash is picked up and that Mrs. So and so is changed? I'd appreciate it. Thank you. And you say it with a smile and you thank him. You say it in a non-threatening way. Most likely they'll be open to it. But if you go like this, it's like the defense mechanism stand up and then it's gonna be a powwow. No. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. Remember that. So you want to tell that CNA, you know what? Mr. So and so, I'm watching him. They said this and this happened on the weekend. I mean, doing this shift earlier. So if you see anything, could you please come get me? They tell me he only ate 25%. Can you please make sure he gets like a supplement or something and let me know how much he's eating, okay? Because I'm watching his nutrition. So your CNA has their assignment. Make sure they're writing it so that they know what your expectations are. If somebody has a temperature, please let me know. I mean, we've had CNAs, I've heard that they don't take vitals, they just put fake vitals. That kind of scared the EGBs out of me. Imagine I'm giving medication and then you're giving me fake vitals. And that's why a lot of places are saying the nurses need to take their own vitals because, hey, you're giving up that blood pressure medication. And if I have a CNA, I cannot trust her to do a blood pressure for me. That's a problem for me. Maybe I need to watch this CNA and do some more instruction because that's the thing. Because we have the license, everything is falling on us. And that is wrong, right? I used to work places where CNAs were allowed to do AccuChecks. All of a sudden, they can do AccuCheck. This is a task. You can teach someone how to clean and to do that's something you can teach a CNA. And this is one of the reasons why nurses are quitting because everything is on the nurse. They just keep piling it on, piling it on. We have to do all the dressing, all the vitals, all the how can one person do all that for 20 patients? Come on. Managers, supervisors, you guys can do better than that. And that's why you're losing your nurses. So talk to your CNA about what your expectations are. Because if they report to you early, you can prevent hospitalization. And you don't have to have your DON call you in the office and say, why are all your patients returning to the hospital? And do you know why? That's because for them, when the managers or the state comes in and they see that you had so many re-up, we call them, it's a tag. It costs them money. And of course, we need to explain to our CNAs the reason behind what we do. If they get an understanding, okay, then they're more amenable to understand. And fall precautions, oh my gosh, that's a whole different video, right? How do we prevent falls? And I know everybody talks about that, but there are some really simple things that CNAs can do. And you as a nurse, like treating pain, like changing them when they're wet, like giving them water. We got so many of our patients who are so dehydrated, and a lot of their issues stem from not getting enough fluid. To me, that breaks my heart. To me, that's a form of abuse to have somebody in your facility and they don't even get enough to drink. One of my suggestions is to have a hydration CNA that goes around and offers fluid. Of course, she will have the list of all the restrictions of, thickening fluids and all that kind of stuff. But these people are not being hydrated. And a lot of your re-ops result from them being so dry. Just, whew, so much. And I talked about praising in public and counsel in private. Okay. The last thing I want to talk about is being fair. And I think I'm still thinking in terms of supervision, but not necessarily. Because as a nurse, if you have like two CNAs on your team, your expectations of both of them should be the same. If something needs to be addressed, like I said, if it's not that important, let it go. Now, if they're consistently coming late, you might want to say, hey, is everything okay? I noticed that you were late like 3 times this week. Anything going on? And again, you're showing concern, but it gives you an idea as to what is going on. Okay. So if a CNA is belligerent, and we'll talk about that next week, there are ways to address it. Just like when your kids misbehave, you don't address the issue right away. But sometimes I remember they used to do something and I'd give them a look and I don't call them in, on the side, and they think I'd forgotten about it. And it's like 30 minutes before end of season. I'm like, can I talk to you for a minute? I don't let things go, right? I'm not going to write you up for the first offense, but I'm going to address it. So as a nurse, you need to address. So you could say, and the last thing before I forget is to help your CNAs with entering a light, giving a cup of water, helping them change, turning position, get out of bed. That goes a long way. Okay. So make sure your CNA understands how valuable they are to you. And that's why I feel like management, there was something, I was looking at a thread today about the CMS wanting to cut funding. And someone said, oh, your management can't do nothing about that. They need to increase the reimbursement. And I said, there's so much your management can do. I've personally believed that in an office, I own a home care company for 13 years, right? When I sold that company, the employees cried. They cried. It broke my heart because they knew that they weren't going to have a boss like me, because I invested so much in terms of building relationship. We're a family. Even recently, I was in the area and I emailed them like, I'm going to be there. Can we have lunch? And we got together and had dinner. But that's because I invested in that. So as a manager, I always said the buck stops here in terms of responsibility, but everything flows from the top. You set the tone for your organization. You set the tone. And an organization could be 3, right? But your team, you set the tone of fairness, of empathy, of praising them, of showing empathy and caring, coming in, giving them a cup of coffee, bringing them their favorite donut. You do those little unexpected things. And me, I like to cook for everybody. So I'm always baking and bringing little things, right? And partaking, sitting together with them. I worked in a facility years ago. I was a brand new nurse. And there was a patio and I sat there. There were 2 CNAs sitting eating. And I say, is it okay if I sit here? And I say, you want to sit here? I'm like, yeah. They're like, oh no, the nurses sit over there. This is for us CNAs. I'm like, well, I'm breaking this rule. I'm sitting here if it's okay with you. Don't have barriers. Come on. This is an opportunity for you to learn, to kumbaya, to create community, to create that sense of togetherness and team. It's not that hard, people. The world is so hard. Life is so hard. We need to invest in creating and making sure that the 8 hours, 12 hours that somebody spends in a facility is not torture for them. No one should feel palpitations and everything tightening up when you think you have to go into work. That is wrong. I mean, I work in a facility. I'm going around, seeing patients, and the DON walks around, blah, 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 blah. She walked straight through a whole length of that unit. She did not make eye contact with one person. He did not acknowledge one person. In my view, people like that should not be in that position. Yes, you could tell me, oh, I've been a DON for 20 years. I'm not impressed. Anybody can learn those regs. That does not make you a good manager, a good DON. But this is what we are dealing with in long-term care and healthcare in general. People who are there who should not be in those positions. I said it. Anyway, I appreciate your attention. Aisha, thank you again for being here. I don't know if you had a comment. Layla Rose, hi. Thank you so much for watching. Does anybody have any questions? I think next week what I want to do is just bring certain scenarios. And if there is anything that in particular you would like me to address, because I know some nurses really struggle with the CNA relationship, and you have to be committed to do those things because you have no control over who they hire. Unfortunately, I wish they would do a better job screening even nurses. I've worked with some crummy nurses that made my life hell, but I was like, you're not going to break me. You're not going to break me, okay? But we can talk about some specific situation because I know I've had CNA look me in my face and challenge my authority, but I dealt with it, okay? You don't have to be, going head to head because people are stressed out. And with everything we see that happen in that hospital with that crazy guy, we got crazy people all over the place. And sometimes if you stop to think about it, you're going to be paralyzed with fear. But we know that we can't. We are there to do a job, and nobody knows when our time is going to be called. We cannot be, saying that we're so concerned something's going to happen. No, we go about and we do our job. We take care of patients. We take care of patients. So we need our CNAs. They need us. The facilities need all of us. So we just going to have to learn those skills on how to improve the relationships. And like any relationships, whether it's with male, female, or whatever, it takes work. It takes work. And you're just going to be committed. You can't say, well, I have enough on my plate. Well, dealing with that CNA is something on your plate. So you can't get rid of it. So you might as well just hang in there and work it. Work it. Okay? Well, thank you so much, guys, for watching. And I hope you found this useful. I'm going to keep it on the on the YouTube channel, Nurse Training and Advocacy. So you can go ahead and there's going to be a replay. You'll be able to see it again. And if you see anyone, anyone who could benefit from watching it, just kind of refer them to that YouTube channel. And again, if you subscribe, like it, share the video, I would appreciate it. Give it a thumbs up. Okay? All right, guys. Thanks. Bye.